for the second straight week, and maybe took Ohio State's defense 2 quarters to really figure some things out here against Marshall, 49-14 win. But it felt like there were a couple of drives in there where things were a little weird. Same thing happens with Michigan State, but at the end of the day, they only gave up 7 points, and they caused a couple turnovers. I'm Stephen Means. That's Andrew Gillis, and that's Stefan Krajisnik. Andrew, is Ohio State's defense concerning at all to you as it heads into Big Ten play after its first Big Ten game of the season?
Moderately, but not completely. I think we've talked about this before on the pod. We've talked about this in videos. The first couple drives of games have been issues, I think, for Ohio State. It has been kind of those slow starts, and those are concerns, right? I mean, Michigan State had, 9 or 10 yards of play that they were averaging. They had the fumble inside the 15-yard line or whatever that was. I mean, this game could have been very different had 2 fumbles not happened for Michigan State. Now, obviously, they did, and, you could point to a couple of different things with Ohio State. Hey, well, if Will Howard doesn't throw that interception, maybe it's 38-0, whatever. But the fact of the matter is that Ohio State was getting gashed a little bit early, and that happened against Marshall, and it kind of happened a little bit against Akron. And are we nitpicking? Yes. But we were talking about this defense as maybe the best defense in the country, and this is what can propel Ohio State to super team status. So, I'm moderately concerned about the defense because you look at kind of where this defense is headed and where this group is headed. They might just be really good, which is fine, but I don't, the first 4 games have not screamed to me, this is the most dominant defense of a generation, or this is the most dominant defense in a decade, or this is the most dominant defense, that we've seen in the college football playoff era. And those are things that you have to clean up because the schedule is getting harder. I know you play Iowa, but then you play Oregon, then you play Nebraska, then you play Penn State, and you're gonna have to rectify some of these things as you kind of get into the meat of the schedule.
I think that's the problem. Stefan, I'm going to let you go first here. 1 to 10, how concerned are you about Ohio State's defense?
I'm kind of at a 7, to be honest, and it's just something seems out of sync right now because Ryan Day was saying that, when they went back and kind of watched some of the first half film during halftime, he felt like they had chances to get to the quarterback, and the coverage just kind of needed to be there a touch longer. And we're watching a game, and we're thinking, well, these cornerbacks are kind of sagging off, trying to maybe buy themselves a little bit more time. And why isn't the coverage there if they feel like the defensive line is doing well? And then last week, it felt like the defensive line couldn't do enough, and it seems like things are just out of sync right now. And maybe that's a promising sign. Maybe that's a reason to not be concerned because you feel like maybe they're a few things away from, really clicking and really figuring things out. But, through the last 2 games, at least early on, we haven't seen that. And we're a couple fluky plays away from, Michigan State beating up 17-10 or something like that in this game, and we're having a totally different conversation about that first half. So it's just odd right now, right? Like we felt like at corner and at safety they didn't have a lot of questions, and that area struggled a little bit today. And then we felt like at defensive line didn't have a lot of questions, and they kind of struggled last week. So when is it all going to click for this team? Because at some point you stop saying they're close, and you start wondering, well, maybe that's a trend, right? Maybe that's a consistent issue. So like Andrew said, Iowa's maybe not the biggest test, but when you look at what offenses have done that have made things difficult for Ohio State, Oregon kind of fits that mold. Nebraska, not so much, but Oregon fits that mold. Like I think about a team, like Texas, maybe that's not too much of a concern, but a team like Bama, like they can run the ball and just grind you out and go on a long drive. Like we're looking at things big picture for this team, right? Like we're looking at them compared to the top 10, top 5, top 3 teams in the country. You start to have some concerns about how they're going to match up with some of those offenses if things don't start to click for them.
I don't know what I'm at. I think both of you are being nitpicky. But also, I was being nitpicky at halftime. Yeah. And then they didn't give up another point, and they fixed those issues. So to the point that you're making about Oregon, I agree with you. But also, what if they just fix those issues after the first quarter, right? What if it's not as big of a deal? I think 2 things are happening right now. They missed Tyleik Williams. Ryan Day said after the game that Tyleik Williams was available to play in an emergency situation. In fact, he compared it to Donovan Jackson's situation in week 2 of the season against Western Michigan, where he could have played, but they thought an extra week of rest, he'd be ready to go. So I expect Tyleik Williams to be available, and not only just be available, but actually play. That's the key word. Being available at Ohio State does not mean you are going to play. We have seen that time and time again, and that has been true this year. I think Tyleik Williams is going to play next week and not just be available. Getting him back is a huge boost to that defensive line. But I do agree with both of you. There's something off with these cornerbacks who are not named Denzel Burke right now. And I don't know if it's lack of motivation. I don't know if it's schematics. I don't know if guys have just regressed as players. But there's just something off. But also, to the point you were saying earlier, Andrew, if we're expecting them to be at 150, and they're at a 95, that's a big gap. But I don't know if it's a realistic expectation to ever have for anybody. I think any other defense or offense we've seen at the level that we're putting Ohio State's defense at the beginning of the season, we said it afterward. We're trying to place that on Ohio State right now, and I don't know. I don't know if we're being nitpicky. I don't know if I'm now on the other side where it's like, hey, it's all good. They're going to get to the Oregon game. It's going to be fine. They're only going to give up 6 points. I don't know which way to go. I don't think you two are wrong. I just don't know if we're right either to be this nitpicky about a team who's 4-0 and has given up 21 points in 2 weeks, right? I just don't know which side of the fence we're supposed to be on, and that's the problem. Everybody else around the country that we would put at the table with them has had an opportunity for us to find out whether or not you're being nitpicky or not. Alabama just beat Georgia. Texas beat Michigan, right? Tennessee beat Oklahoma. Ohio State's just been able to sleepwalk through things. And maybe it means nothing like it was for Michigan, and I say that knowing what last year was, but we didn't know that at this point. We didn't know Michigan was cheating at this point last year. We just thought easy schedule, but they're sleepwalking through it, and they end up winning a national title. That's on the table, but I also think the nitpickiness is on the table where they do get on the field against Oregon or they do get to a playoff game, and they have to learn their lesson the hard way. We're continuing to have this conversation on Buckeye Talk. That's Andrew. That's Stefan. I'm Steven. Hit the text 614-350-3315. 2-week free trial, $3.99 after that. Ohio State beats Michigan State 38-7.